Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're looking at something a little different. We all love those like Home Alone style scenarios, especially around the holidays. But what happens when things get a little too creepy?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about those Home Alone moments that turn into nightmares. And, you shared a video with me from the Mr. Nightmare YouTube channel that has some pretty chilling real-life stories that'll definitely make you think twice about being home alone.
Oh yeah, Mr. Nightmare. He's great at telling those creepy stories. True scary encounters, urban legends, that kind of thing. But what's really interesting about focusing on one video like this is we get to kind of look at not just the stories themselves, but how he tells them.
Yeah, like a master class in fear.
Yeah.
How does he build that suspense?
Right.
What are the details that really get under our skin? It's fascinating.
Okay, so let's jump into the first story. Imagine this rural Michigan, a 13-year-old kid home alone playing Grand Theft Auto. Vice City, pretty typical, right? And then bang, a loud metallic crash from outside.
Talk about a game over. But you know what's interesting is how this kid immediately jumps into action. He doesn't just ignore it. He grabs a rifle, checks the windows, and heads out to the storage building where the sound came from and finds the door wide open. This isn't some kid waiting for mom and dad to come home and handle it. He's forced to be the protector way too early.
That's such a good point. It's not just the jump scare of the bang, it's that instant shift in his mindset. He goes from playing video game to suddenly being responsible for his own safety. So he closes the storage building door, goes back inside, locks up, keeps an eye on things. Seems like the smart move, right?
It seems logical for sure, but here's where Mr. Nightmare adds that extra layer of psychological terror the kid's watching. And he calls his dad, no answer, and then creaking from upstairs. Oh man, that detail's brilliant.
Oh, it's so good, right? It makes you wonder, was there someone inside the whole time while he was checking the storage building? It just expands that sense of danger.
Right, the threat isn't just outside anymore. It can be right there in the house, closer than he thinks. And so he grabs the rifle again, goes upstairs, and sees bare feet under the bathroom door.
Yeah.
That image, I mean, come on. It's classic horror movie stuff.
Oh yeah, it's that primal fear of the unknown, Something's there, but you don't know what. So he does what any smart kid would do. He whispers a 911 call from the bathroom, hiding in there. Talk about thinking on your feet.
He's doing what he can to stay safe, but then it gets worse. Footsteps approaching, a deep voice says, "What's up, kid?" I mean, the intruder knew he was in there the whole time.
Chillin', right? This guy wasn't just stumbling around, he was hunting.
Exactly. And the kid, thinking fast, he tells the intruder he's on the phone with the police, has a gun. The intruder tries to force the door open, but luckily it's locked. He ends up fleeing through the back door just as the police arrive. Talk about a close call.
It's a huge relief, right? But then there's this chilling realization he left the house door unlocked while he was checking the storage building. Something so simple almost cost him everything.
And that's the message, Mr. Nightmare. Is driving home, security awareness matters, even when you think you're dealing with something small. Those little oversights can become huge vulnerabilities.
So we've got the initial shock, the psychological twist, the near confrontation, and then that lesson learned. It's like a formula for fear, but it really works. What do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners so far?
I think this first story really highlights how quickly things can go from bad to worse, and how important it is to be prepared for anything, even when you think you're safe at home. I think it really shows you just how fast things can change and how important it is to always be prepared. But let's move on to the second story. This one's a little different. It taps into that fear of being stalked, that feeling of not knowing if you're safe, even in your own home.
Yeah, this one starts with an 18-year-old woman, Kate. She's home alone, her parents are away, and she's at a gas station just filling up her tank when a man in a black Jeep Cherokee pulls up next to her. He seems friendly enough, asks for directions to the interstate.
But here's where Mr. Nightmare starts adding those little details that just feel off. Instead of using his phone for directions, the man pulls out a notepad and writes them down. It's a small thing, but it makes you wonder, why is he really being that careful?
Right. It's like a little crack in the facade of normalcy, like something's not quite right. And then he asks her, she's from the area, finds out she grew up there. He's from out of town, just making small talk. And then as he's leaving, he asks her name. She tells him Kate. He says, "What a lovely name," and drives off.
Seems harmless enough, right?
Yeah.
But as she's driving home, she sees that same black Jeep Cherokee heading in the opposite direction of the interstate. Could be a coincidence. But that seed of doubt has been planted, that feeling when you're not sure if you're being paranoid or if something is really wrong.
Oh yeah, that uncertainty is the worst. And later that night, she's walking to her car. She hears footsteps nearby, brushes it off at first. But then when she's back home, a man's voice calls out from the woods, Kate.
He knows her name. He's been watching her. That's a whole other level of creepy Mr. Nightmare. Knows how to tap into that fear of being targeted. You know, someone knowing exactly where you are and who you are.
It's like that violation of privacy is almost scarier than any physical threat at this point. She calls her parents, but they're like, oh, it's probably just a neighbor or something. But she's not convinced, and guess what? The next night, it happens again. The voice calling her name from the woods.
This time she calls 911, but the police can't find anyone, and that's what makes this so terrifying. It's that lack of control. You know, no one believes you, and you're completely on your own.
It's like gaslighting, but with real danger lurking in the shadows. And of course it escalates. She has to go to work, and when she comes home that night, the man is waiting for her this time. He's wearing a mask and tries to carjack her, smashing the driver's side window.
He goes from lurking and watching to a full-on attack. Mr. Nightmare is showing us how quickly these situations can get out of control and how crucial it is to trust your gut instinct.
Thankfully, she manages to escape and drives straight to a friend's house, but it makes you think she shared her name with a complete stranger at a gas station. It seemed harmless at the time.
Right, and this isn't about blaming the victim. It's about understanding how these predators can take advantage of everyday situations. It's a reminder to be careful about who you give your information to and to be aware of your surroundings, especially when you're alone.
It's a lot to think about, right? How vulnerable we can be even in those normal everyday moments. Ready for story number 3.
Yeah, let's hear. Yeah, this one takes a bit of a different approach. It's all about that feeling of unease you get when something just feels off, even if you can't explain why.
Okay, so story number 3 this time. It's a teenage boy, another gamer home alone, and an elderly woman rings the doorbell. Seems harmless enough, right? She just needs to use the phone.
Yeah, it's something out of a cheesy movie, almost too cliche. But, you know, Mr. Nightmare, he knows how to twist things up. The woman is, like, overly polite, almost too much so, with this constant smile that just feels a little weird. And when the boy doesn't let her in, she calls him rude. It just doesn't match her whole sweet little old lady act.
It's that clash that makes it creepy.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like you start second-guessing yourself. Is the kid being too harsh? Is she actually dangerous? It messes with your expectations about, you know, age and who you think you should trust.
Exactly. We're so used to thinking of elderly people as harmless that this kind of throws you off guard. And so the boy, he goes back to his game, but then he hears this clinking sound on the window. It's the old woman tapping something metal against the glass.
Okay, yeah, now that's not, okay, she's not just persistent. She's really trying to get in. It makes you think, what if he had let her in?
That's the question Mr. Nightmare wants you to ask, right? He's upping the ante, making you think about the consequences, and the boy, he goes to another room. But she keeps ringing the doorbell. Finally, he decides to confront her. But when he opens the door, it's not the woman. It's a man who says he's her son.
Oh, another layer of manipulation, right? The concerned son. He apologizes for his mom saying she has dementia and wandered off. The boy even tells him he saw her in the backyard trying to be helpful.
And this is where it gets really strange. The boy checks the backyard, and there's no sign of either of them, the woman or the son. Were they even really there, or was this whole thing a trick to case the place?
It's like Mr. Nightmare is playing with your sense of reality. You don't know what to believe, who to trust, and it gets even creepier. Later that night, the boy hears the clinking on the window again, this time when he looks. It's the old woman back at the window holding a kitchen knife.
That's a pretty terrifying image. The sweet little old lady is now a very real threat. It reminds you that looks can be deceiving, and even your gut feeling isn't always right.
The doorbell starts ringing nonstop, but the boy, thankfully, he stays put and waits it out. This story really sticks with you because you never find out the truth. Was she really sick? Was that man her son? What were they trying to do?
We don't get those answers, and that's part of why it's so effective. Mr. Nightmare leaves it to your imagination to fill in the blanks, and sometimes that's even scarier than anything he could have shown us. But before we go, we have to talk about Mr. Nightmare's own story. It's not just viewer submissions this time. He's the one in the scary situation.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. We get to see how the horror expert reacts when it happens to him. So he's house sitting for a friend, taking care of this super vocal Pomsky, and the dog starts barking like crazy at the back door. Mr. Nightmare figures he just wants to go outside.
But when he gets to the door, he realizes someone's trying to open it from the outside. He looks through the screen, and there's this stranger staring back at him.
In broad daylight, in a supposedly safe backyard, that's gotta be unsettling, right? The stranger asks if Melissa is there, says he knows the homeowner's sister.
But Mr. Nightmare, he's not buying it. The guy doesn't match the description of anyone. His friend's sister would know he's older. Disheveled. Seems like he might be drunk.
So what does he do? Does he panic? Call the police? Does he let the guy in?
He doesn't do any of that. He takes control.
Yeah.
He tells the man to leave very firmly and mentions the security cameras on the property. The guy backs down and walks away.
It's like he's using his storytelling skills in real life, right?
Yep.
Setting boundaries, establishing authority, using the cameras as a deterrent.
Yeah, he's not just reacting, he's shaping the situation, and that's a powerful lesson for everyone. Sometimes the best way to deal with fear is to confront it head on. Be prepared. Take charge.
So we've gone through 3 very different Home Alone horror stories, each one kind of messing with our heads in different ways. But what does it all mean? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think these stories remind us that danger can be lurking anywhere, even when you think you're safe. They show us how important it is to be prepared to trust your gut and to know what to do when things go wrong.
Whether it's a weird noise, a stranger at the door, or just a bad feeling you get, it's all about being aware of your surroundings and doing what you can to protect yourself. It can make all the difference.
And remember, these stories aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to empower you. The more you know about how these things work, the better you can protect yourself and the people you care about.
So here's something to think about. How has your view of Home Alone changed after hearing these real-life stories? What can you do to be more prepared and stay safe? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, stay safe out there.